some of the darkest places provide the greatest fruit, right? So we think about the womb and how dark the womb is, but it produces new life. We think about the dark soil that the seed is planted in that becomes a plant of some sort, right? So darkness actually serves to produce life. And it's unfortunate that many of us are raised to be afraid of darkness, because in my own life, it's been the darkest seasons of the journey that have produced the greatest fruit. Darkness, in fact, is evidence of light at work, which seems like a paradox. But John of the Cross helps us understand this in a really helpful way by giving the metaphor of a campfire, a log of wood that is burning with fire. The wood itself is darkened and has this darkness effect, this experience of darkness. All the while it's being lit on fire with this incredible light. And so in the spiritual journey, there are seasons in which we experience what feels like darkness, but it's in those times actually that the light is so bright that it darkens our senses so that it seems as if we're in dark. But it's in those times when we are purified in a lot of ways and liberated then to live more fully into our essence. Kind of burning away the chaff, those unconscious motivations, those compulsions, all of that kind of gets burned up by this fire, this light that we're not conscious of. So I'll never forget when my teacher Thomas Keating said that if we stay on the spiritual journey long enough, the practices that used to sustain us in our faith journey will fall short. And when that happens, it can be pretty disillusioning and troubling. But he says that if you stay on the journey long enough and those practices that have sustained you fall short, what that is really an invitation to go deeper with God, deeper in trust and in faith and courage. And so for me, along the way, when the various practices that I was accustomed to weren't helping me grow, I had kind of plateaued. I needed something more, and that something more became for me contemplative spirituality. So practices that would support me in the ongoing journey with God, a journey that actually required more faith than certainty, and it really required more courage and deeper trust. So I think, all people of faith, people who are interested in their spiritual life, will face at one time or another a season of darkness, and that can be really troubling. But just to realize that when we come into those seasons of darkness, when the spiritual practices that used to sustain us aren't sustaining us anymore, I think it's really important to not worry that there's something wrong with me. This is a natural part of the spiritual journey. It's a part that is required so that we can be birthed into something new. And so when we reach these seasons of darkness, it's critical to find a spiritual practice that will be big enough, if you will, to hold that darkness, to hold that uncertainty, to hold the questions and the doubts and everything that's going on that is troubling and unearthing or unhinging in some way. Contemplative spirituality has a way of really holding that season of darkness so that this new life can germinate. And in time, that new life will be born. But it's not up to us to determine the time frame for that. And so what is important is that we find spiritual practice that allows us to be with that season of darkness, waiting for the revelation of light.
Is there like a ticket or like an app you can use to get around the darkness?
We can certainly opt to exit the experience of darkness by going back asleep, numbing out avoiding. We may even, in the season of darkness, be prompted to make some kind of change that will allow us to kind of incubate in that darkness. But if we resist those invitations, or if we avoid the uncomfortability of the darkness, then we can really kind of stop the process of creating new life. So the critical thing in these seasons is that we find a way to sit with what is uncomfortable and sometimes painful, and in other ways perhaps distressing, or a way that causes friction in relationship or in community. We have to find a way to hold that so that it can do its work in us and bring about this new life that's being germinated in the dark that we can't see, and we don't know how it's going to turn out. But this is a season to deepen our trust and our faith in God, in ultimate reality, that life is in service of life, and we just get to learn how to cooperate with it.
Where did you feel God was in the dark?
I've had various seasons of darkness in the spiritual journey, and in the beginning, in my first encounter with darkness, I had no sense of God. I mean, I really didn't know if God was near me. I wondered if there really was a God. The darkness threatened everything that I had known, and it was pretty excruciating. If it hadn't been for contemplative prayer, I don't think I could have gotten through that season of darkness. I think I would have exited it somehow, because I did feel all alone. I never in my life had felt more alone or distant from God. And so it was only in enduring that season that I was later able to come out on the other side and look back and see all the work that had been taking place in me to produce this new life in me, which is evidence of God. And so even now, the way I relate to God is fairly different from how I related to God before. And so not in seasons of darkness, not only am I being changed, but my perceptions are being changed as well. My eyes are being opened in different ways. My ears are being opened in different ways. And I'm coming to relate to ultimate reality in new ways. In ways in which I am less in control and I am more surrendered and letting go into mystery, that which I don't know. And I take heart in seeing evidence of God, who is love and mercy and forgiveness, in the ways in which love, forgiveness, and mercy play out in my life. And that's where I experience God more than anywhere else. Before I didn't really know anything about darkness as a necessary part of the spiritual journey. Darkness was something to be feared. And so I saw light as good and darkness as bad. But I've come to really value and appreciate darkness because I see that it's in the darkness that great life is produced. And too much light can burn things up. Too much light can be blinding. But when there are seasons of darkness interplaying with seasons of light, that's where new life can really flourish. Yeah, I think before I was perhaps a little afraid of mystery, because mystery is that which I don't know. I can't explain it. I can't control it. I struggle to grasp it. But as I progressed in the spiritual journey, learning really skills of letting go, of consent, of saying yes to life, to God, to the will of Spirit, I have come to really value letting go into what I don't know. There's something freeing about it. I don't have to be in charge. I can trust that God's got me, that I don't have to worry about whether or not God's going to let go of me. I think before, my faith was very much about holding on to God, doing whatever I could to hold on by whatever, if it was particular beliefs or particular behaviors, do whatever it takes to hold on to God. What I've come to realize through contemplative prayer is that I can let go, that God's got me, that God's holding me, that there's nothing I can do that's going to cause God to let go. I'm in God. God is in me. There's no separation. There's no way to get loose from that reality. It's just so freeing, and it's so good, and that's life, that's joy, that's freedom, I can rest in life no matter how difficult it gets along the way, because I know God's got me.
Real good news.
And God's got you. And contemplative prayer helps us realize that. Just can't promote it enough.
What gets birthed in God's womb?
All of life is birthed in the womb of God. I mean, that's where I come from. That's where you come from. That's where all living things come from. The womb of God. What a thought, huh? What's even perhaps more radical is to imagine that God can be birthed through us. And Mary, the mother of Jesus, is the luminary of that, right? And that's the invitation to all of us, to learn how to birth God. Yeah.
I mean, like, what are we missing out on? What could we be birthing?
What could we be birthing?
What keeps us from birthing?
Oh my gosh.
What hinders the birthing process?
Constriction, fear, resistance. That is really profound, actually. That hit me pretty hard. It's more about kenosis, this Greek term about self-emptying. So what does it take to birth God, or to create new life, or to make space within so that God's life can flow more freely through us? It's about self-emptying, emptying of our self-absorption, of our inflated ego or our deflated ego. It's about emptying up of these false identities of who we are, and in that, in letting go, yielding, surrendering, trusting, these are the conditions in which more space is made for God. Trusting, surrendering, yielding, receptivity. These tend to be historically gendered to be rather feminine aspects, right? We all need to embrace this side of our humanity that allows for opening to more of God and letting God flow in and through us. It's the over control, it's the resistance and restriction, the fear, the distrust that clogs up the human body, really, and doesn't allow for the Spirit to flow and generate new life in and through us. Darkness isn't something to be feared or avoided or resisted, because darkness is in service of life. And we need both darkness and light to produce this new life. So everything belongs. And it brings to mind, the rough patches in life that we go through that may seem dark in terms of how we act out or live out of our lower self or our false self, and the stupid stuff we do and the mistakes that we make. Even that is part of the soil of our becoming. And so there's no shame in being human.
What do you mean by becoming?
Yeah, becoming our truest self. It's all in service of our awakening and our becoming children of God, living into that reality, understanding that, awakening to it, becoming it by being aware of it, not achieving it in some way, but opening to it, realizing it, attaining it more than achieving it, attaining it in terms of apprehending, realizing, coming into awareness that I am a child of God, and all this stuff of life, the pain, the suffering, the mistakes, it's all in service of that greater awareness so that I can live more free and be of greater service to life. And so it is in the losing of our life that we truly find it. But that takes great courage, and it doesn't come easy for most of us. And so contemplative practice helps us to find courage and to find the way in which we can let go and open up and not be afraid to lose our life, but to lay it down freely, to let it go, so that we can experience the greater life. So in contemplative practice, we come to God, we come to prayer from a place of trust, and we practice trust throughout this particular prayer method, whichever one we're following. And so in this way, contemplative spirituality is in service of creating greater trust in us to be able to let go, to lay down our life. It's something that really happens more in our unconscious than our conscious mind. And in that process, we find in our daily life, then we're able to let go more often and trust more fully, because in this contemplative practice, we've been practicing that. We've been practicing letting go, trusting. In essence, we've been practicing dying, so that in our daily life, when the challenges come, the circumstances are such in which we want to self-protect, our contemplative practice has helped us develop these skills of moving in the opposite direction and letting go and trusting, and that opens us up to the life that is greater than the life that we wanted to protect.